Hey, what's up everybody? I'd like to welcome you to another Juice tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about object-oriented concepts. So we have this ADSR that we created over the past couple tutorials in our Synth tutorial series. And now what we want to do is we want to subclass this out to its own class so it encapsulates its own behavior. And this is a common question that we get in the community about how to start creating larger apps and plugins and when to move things out to their own class and things like that, and how to pass this data around. So I hope that this tutorial is helpful for you. This is my perspective, so it's not by any means the the one perspective of how to do this, but this is something that I've learned through my time, and I hope that it's helpful for you. So before we get started, be sure to join the audio programmer community. Great place for audio programmers of all levels to connect. We have now over 5,000 members in our Discord, so you can join us on theaudioprogrammer.com/community. And if you find this helpful for you, be sure to like and subscribe. So let's go ahead and get started. So currently we're in our Synth project. I'm just going to open this up in Xcode and show you what we have. So we currently have this this ADSR that we created a couple tutorials ago that is in the behavior is kind of abstracted by these sliders. So the user has the sliders that they could use to control the ADSR, and we have these slider attachments. And what we want to do is, as we can see, this is starting to get a little bit bulky, and what we want to do is maybe we could start moving some of this out to its own class and make this its own component. So I can call ADSR, and it produces the attack, decay, sustain, and release sliders all at once without having to call all of these each individually at a time. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to go back to the producer, and this is where we're going to start. So if you remember, or if you've seen any of the past tutorials where I talk about plugin architecture, we have this plugin processor, which is kind of the data side of our plugin, where we have all of the hard number crunching that happens. Then we have the plugin editor, which is what the user sees. So all the visual components that we have that the user can use to control those parameters that are happening in the processor. And what one thing that I've learned recently has been that we want to kind of carry on that type of thinking as we start to create and subclass things out. So anything that's visual, we want to have separated for anything that's doing data and number crunching and that sort of thing. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a group, and I will just do that by just right-clicking in here, and I'll do Add New Group. I'll just call this UI, so this will be where all of my UI classes are going to be. So I'll just move this into my source folder, and then I will create another group, and I will call this data. So this will be all of the data processing that happens. And I think, it's sitting in my UI folder now. Just need it to sit outside. There we go. So there we go. And now we need to create, so let's take those sliders and let's move those out to a UI class of their own. So I can call an ADSR, and conceptually that will just be those 4 sliders and all that behavior encapsulated into one class. So the way that we would do this, we could add a new component class. So component, once again, is just a Juice base class that refers to anything visual that you see on the screen in a plugin or an audio app. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to add this one, and I will just call this ADSR component, and I will create this. And what I like to do, so one thing that I found confusing when I was first starting is that I see that I created a folder here called UI and another folder called data, but I don't see anything like that in the source folder, okay? Because those are 2 separate things. And what I'd like to do is I like to create my folders in my actual folders in my structure to mirror what I see in the Juice project. That's how I like to do it. I'm not sure if it's the right way or not, but I find that it makes things a lot easier for me. So I've created this folder called UI, and it's called, and then the class is called ADSR component. Now I've created that. I'll create another one called data, and let's do a new CPP and header file. So this will not be a component class. It'll just be its own, just a blank CPP and header file. And once again, I will create a new folder in here. I will call this data. And you don't by any means need to even create folders called data in UI. I just find it easier for me. So I will call this ADSR data. And we will do that. So now we have a data class that's going to encapsulate what our ADSR is doing, and a UI class that will encapsulate it. So a UI class that will encapsulate what the ADSR looks like visually. Okay, and those two things are separate, right? So maybe before I might have taken the ADSR object that was sitting in my Synth voice class, and I might have said, okay, so the ADSR object as data, the Juce class of the Juce ADSR class, and the plugin editor, the sliders that are what the ADSR is visually to the user. I would have thought maybe before that those two things were part of the same thing, and I would have put those two things in the same class. But I don't know if I want to say it's the best practice, but I think that a lot of people would say that you would want to keep those two things separate. So keep your data separate from what your UI is doing. Okay, you don't want those two things to be together in the same class. So okay, so now we're going to open up in Xcode again, and here we are. So now we're just going to do a little bit of kind of surgery, so to speak, and this can be a little bit messy or a little bit confusing. So I hope that this is helpful for you and that it doesn't the road isn't too windy on this. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to kind of transplant everything that's about our ADSR into this ADSR component class. So I will just take these sliders, and I'm just going to cut those. I'll just add a new tab, and then this tab will be the ADSR component tab, and I will just paste those. So now my sliders are an ADSR component. Now what I want to do is I want to actually include the ADSR component in the plugin editor now. So I'm going to do a hashtag include, and it would be UI/ADSR component.h. So now we have the ADSR component. So now what I want to do is I'll just create one of these objects now. So ADSR component. Now this is what I'm going to call ADSR. Okay, rather than having separate sliders. So now what I want to do is I want to go in here, and now we need to figure out what else we need to transfer over. Okay, so we go back to our editor, and I will go to the CPP, and we have, so now I just go through and I say, okay, everything that I see that says attack slider, I probably need to move it over to my new ADSR component class. So we have these slider attachments, right, that we created a couple tutorials ago, and now I will just take that and I'm going to move that over to my ADSR component constructor. Okay, so there we go, like that. And we're going to get a bunch of errors that are going to pop up, but don't worry, we're going to work through each one of those one at a time. And then we have this set slider params, and we have our sliders. And now I can just take that, I'm going to cut that, and I am going to put that in, once again, in our ADSR component. And so we have this set slider params method that we created in our editor that now it's saying that it doesn't know what we mean by that. And that's because that's still sitting in our editor, right? So we have this method that we created in our last tutorial called set slider params. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to bring it over to my ADSR component.cpp. Now I'm just going to change this to make this a ADSR component method now. So it's not sitting in tap synth audio processor editor anymore. It's now an ADSR component method. And now I need to put this in the header file as well. So we got set slider params and move back over to the header. And this is a private method. I'm going to put this as a private method. Don't need to have it public because it's just something that I'm using internally. And so that's fine now. Let's see, what else do we need to bring back over? So we have all of this stuff where we were setting the bounds and all of that. We did that last tutorial. So now I'm just going to take that and I'm going to move it into resized in my ADSR component class. So now that has the resized method. Okay, I'm just going to take all of this stuff in Paint. I'm just going to make the background black. So I'm going to do g.fill all juice colors black. There we go. Okay, so what else do we have here? So that looks like we've got everything, right? And so we're going to need to do, so we have this ADSR now that's sitting in our plugin editor, okay? And so we're going to need to do something like make this visible. And then we're going to, in the resized, we're going to need to set the ADSR bounds, right? So, because that's what we were doing before. Now we just have to do that using our new class. But you're going to see that we have a problem first, which is that we have this error that says use of undeclared identifier attachment, and then use of undeclared identifier audio processor. So let's just think about that. So we have this attack attachment. It doesn't know what attack attachment is. So it's probably sitting still in our plugin editor. So let's go to our plugin editor header file. And yes, we have attack attachment. All of these attachments, we need to grab the using as well, bring that along for the ride. So now all of that can now go in our ADSR component header file like that. Okay, so that's all sitting there now. And what else? So that should get rid of our one error. Should. So we can build here real quick and you'll see that should get rid of that error. And now we have one more error, use of undeclared identifier audio processor. So what is audio processor? So if we go back to the plugin editor header file, we see that audio processor is a reference to our plugin processor. Okay, so that's how we get access to the audio processor value tree state. Okay, so and if you're not sure what I mean by reference, check the C++ tutorial I've done with my son on references. Very valuable to know about. Okay, so now we can see how this class is cleaning up really nicely, right? And we don't need this set slider params method anymore. That's gone now. And so now what we need is we need a way that we can pass this audio processor or the audio processor value tree state into this this slider attachment that we created, right? Because it needs to know about the audio processor value tree state that is sitting in our plugin processor header file, right? Needs access to that data. How are we going to do that? So we can actually pass in the audio processor value tree state as a argument in our constructor. Okay, so that's a good place to pass that in. So what I could do is I can use the constructor and I can say, okay, I want to pass in this this audio processor value tree state object. So I could say juice audio processor value tree state. Now we want to make this a reference because we don't need to make a copy of the audio processor value tree state. So that's why I'm putting that ampersand there, APVTS. And we got to make sure that we do the same thing in our CPP. And now, since we're passing this in as a constructor argument, what we need to do is we need to go back to our plugin editor where we're actually creating the ADSR component, and we need to pass that in as an argument into our ADSR component. And we can do that using an initializer list. So here we have our audio processor editor, audio processor, and now I can say ADSR, and we can pass in that audio processor value tree state object, which would be audio processor dot audio processor or APVTS, just like that. Okay, so that now we should be good to go. Okay, so we got this field audio processor will be initialized after field ADSR. Okay, so we're in a situation where we have the ADSR initializing before the audio processor. Okay, and it's saying that there's a problem there, right? Because we need audio processor to we need the reference to the audio processor before we can get the reference to the audio processor value tree state. So if we go back to our header file, we'll see that our ADSR object is initialized before our audio processor reference. So what we need to do to fix that is we need to put that afterwards. So we need the audio processor to get its reference to our audio processor class, and then we can use the APVTS that's in the audio processor, and that should correct that error. Right? So we still have a build failed. So let's see what else we need. Oh yes. So now this is saying audio processor.apvts. Now we can just grab this argument from our constructor, and I could just get rid of this audio processor and it just say apvts. Okay. So if you wanted to pass in the audio processor, you could, but I'm just trying to follow the rules of encapsulation, which would say don't give your class access to any more data than what you need to. So at the moment, it doesn't need access to the whole processor, just needs access to the APVTS. So that's why I've given it the argument to APVTS rather than the whole processor. Okay, it looks like I might have moved something over that I didn't want to. So this is my combo box for my OSC oscillator selector that we're going to do later. So I just need to move that back over to here. And now what we need to do is we need to go to our CPP, and we just need to make the ADSR visible, right? Which is what we did before. So we do add and make visible ADSR. And now I can say ADSR set bounds. And however I set this is however large those four sliders will be. Okay, because now those four sliders are sitting in this ADSR component, and I can put it wherever I want and make it as big as I want as well. So let's just do get local bounds first and see how that goes. So now we should be fine. So we're just building. Okay, we got build succeeded. And hopefully all of this, but you can see now this audio processor editor is now very contained, isn't it? We see before we had all of this add and make visible for each one of the sliders. We had all of these attachments, but now it's nice and contained. It's very simple to read, right? It's like very straightforward to see what's happening now. So now let's just pull this up. We don't need to make any sounds with it. We can just see what it looks like. And so now we can see that we have that slider, and it looks basically the same way it does before because we set the bounds to whatever get local bounds was. So now let's just go back and let's let's do an example of like, what if I just want it to be on the right hand side of the screen? So let's have a look at our resize method where we're actually setting the size of each one of these sliders. Okay, so one of the things that I see right away is that I have slider height equaling the width divided by 4 minus padding. That's actually wrong. I think I want that to be bounds get height, like that. So I think that's fine. And then slider start, before we had it halfway down the screen, let's just make that 0 now. And notice that I just need to change that in one place, and now it changes everywhere, right? So I don't have to go in and change each individual one. That's the beauty of having just one place where it lists these numbers, and I can just dynamically do that, and it does it to all the sliders at once. So let's see now what we are doing, and hopefully this will, actually, I'm sorry, I needed to do one more thing. So let's go back to the editor, and let's do set bounds, and let's start at get width divided by 2. So let's start in the middle of the screen on the x-axis, and then we will do 0 on the y-axis, and then we will make the width of this get width divided by 2, and then get height. And what we should have is we should have that ADSR now on the right hand side of the screen, rather than going all the way across the screen. And the sliders themselves should be larger as well. And this is something you can toy around with over time. Yeah, so now we have those. We see that it's nicely on the right hand side of the screen. So that's fine, right? So that looks good. Yeah, I can show you a little bit later how to correct these numbers as well. We see that these numbers have that little ... We could correct that a little bit later down the line, but that's something we could do a little bit later when we're tweaking. So let's see, one more thing. So let's do one more thing, right? So we did that. So now we've set the ADSR for the visual aspect of the ADSR. Let's do the same thing for data. So we could do this for data. So at the moment we have this ADSR, an ADSR params that are sitting in Synth voice. Okay, so if we take a look at the methods that we need for this, we can just take a look, and we see that we have a set sample rate, we have an update ADSR, and then we have where we're doing this apply envelope to buffer. So there's really not a whole lot that we need to subclass this out, but I'm just going to do it anyway, just to show you kind of the thinking around it. So and this might be helpful for some people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now go into ADSR data. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I want to add the Juce header. So this will just give me access to all the Juce methods and all that good stuff. So now I'm going to create a class called ADSR data. And since this is going to be a type of ADSR, so I don't really need to recreate all the stuff that the Juce ADSR object is already doing, right? Because we're calling all of these methods like set sample rate, so on and so forth. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to inherit from Juce slider. So I could say ADSR data inherits from public Juce ADSR. Okay, so what I'm saying is ADSR data is a type of Juce ADSR. So I'm just going to add a little bit of functionality to this. And by functionality, I mean like one method that this is going to do that the ADSR class doesn't already do. So Now, once again, we need to make ADSR data visible and include it in our synth voice. So I will do hashtag include, and we will do data, ADSR data. Something like this might be a little bit redundant, but let's just try it out, right? So we have this method now called update ADSR, or actually, I'm sorry. What we're going to do is first we're going to take ADSR and ADSR params, and we're going to take this and we're going to put this now in ADSR data, because that's what we want to do. We want to encapsulate everything that ADSR is doing, and we want to encapsulate that in the ADSR data class. Okay, so I'm just going to move back over here to the ADSR data class, and now I've put ADSR and ADSR params in there. Actually, I don't want ADSR there because ADSR data is a Juce ADSR. Okay, so we just need ADSR params. Now, going back to synth voice, we have this update ADSR where we're doing a float where we got the attack, decay, sustain, and release. And we have these ADSR params that we're updating. Those now live in our ADSR data class. So what I could do is I'm going to cut this for a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method called, I'm actually going to just cut it from here actually, or I'll copy it from here. And I will paste it in my CPP. Sorry about this. So here we go. ADSR data. This is not in the synth voice class. This is in ADSR data now. And now I need to take update ADSR. I need to make sure that I prototype it in my header. So here we go. It's a public method. And now this ADR.set parameters, I can just change this back to set parameters because this is a native method that's called within the ADSR class, right? Which is ADSR data is a type of Juce ADSR. Okay, I need to put a semicolon down here, and now let's see. So we have that. And now what I'll do is I'll go back to my CPP, and we don't have these anymore. And now what I could do is I could say ADSR data update ADSR. And now I will pass in attack, decay, sustain, and release. Okay. Now, why am I doing that? The reason that I'm doing that is because, sorry, this is not ADSR data, this is ADSR. Oh, I need to create it actually. Sorry about this. ADSR data, ADSR. And here we go. And the question is, well, why do that? Why have one method that's called update ADSR, and then within it have another method that's called ADSR update ADSR? Well, the reason is because I just want to build this really quick, make sure this actually gets rid of all of our errors. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yep, so that's good. So the reason that I'm doing that is because remember our processor is calling this update ADSR. Okay, so if I go into the plugin processor, we have this voice update ADSR where we have all of these parameters, right? So what I need to do is I need to make a choice. The choice is either I need to make the ADSR object or the ADSR data object visible to the processor and call it from the processor, or I need to plumb it down through the voice, which is the way that I've done it. I need to plumb it down through through the voice into the synth voice, and then that plugs into the ADSR data object that I've created. Okay, so that's the reason I've done it. Now that probably sounds a little bit redundant to do it like that, but what if I had other parameters that I need to update? So like, let's say that we have a jog wheel, right? So we have like this pitch wheel moved and things like that. Now what I could do is I could actually change this where this actually becomes more of like update all of the stuff, update the pitch wheel, update the ADSR, update everything that needs to be updated. And so what I could do is I could actually change this to update. We don't have anything else that we need to update at the moment, but this is just to show you how extendable this is. So now I'll call this update, of course, in the plugin processor now. This is called update. So, oops, deleting the wrong thing there. And so we see how extendable that is. And now we have all of the behavior of update ADSR inside the ADSR class. All of the data stuff in the ADSR data class, all of the UI stuff in the ADSR component class. So now let's just build this and make sure this all actually is set up correctly. So now we got build succeeded. You know, once again, this is just abstracting out. This is abstracting out behavior. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to instantiate this and make sure that it still actually plays. Fingers crossed. Here we are. Just turn your headphones down a bit if you have them really loud so you don't hear the synth really loud. So now that's working fine. So that's all been set up correctly. Yeah, so just to review the reason why we're doing that is because what we want to do is we want to try to keep the editor and the processor as clean as possible, right? So anytime that we have a whole bunch of stuff that's happening that is around one process, we want to think about taking that and classing that out, moving it out to its own class. And now what happens is that this becomes really simple, right? Once we get the oscillator all set up and everything, then we can take this and we can make an oscillator class that has a selectable oscillator now. And then it would be add and make visible oscillator, add and make visible ADSR. And anybody can, nearly anybody can read that now. That becomes very readable code. And then as you get deeper and deeper, then you start to see the complexity, right? So when you go into ADSR component, now we see all the individual sliders, we see all the individual attachments, we see all of the connections that we need to make, how they're set out, so on and so forth. It starts getting more and more complex. But we want to try to keep the processor and the editor and the behavior and the code that we see there as clean as possible so that it becomes very readable and people can just see it like a tree where the classes are extending out like branches. Sometimes it's not quite as just cut and dry like that, but it's great when it is. So I hope you found that helpful for you. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and also leave your comments if you have better ways that you think that this could be abstracted out. I'd love to hear them, and I will see you next time.